Warrior. Will was working on the numbers in the attic. Mr. Willis had proposed the week past the purchase of a small building with 4 apartments and a basement. It was a lovely old home that had been kept in beautiful condition. The owner was a Serb. He was liquidating assets before he submitted a financial statement to his wife's lawyer. Now was the time to move, Mr. Willis had said. These were important decisions for William Taube. In them lay his as-of-yet unspoken status in the tribe of 1109897 Ontario, Inc. Warrior. Will and Cobb had $200,000 American dollars in a Costa Rican bank account that had grown from nothing but cash transfers in less than 4 months. They had another $100,000 in the investment schedule. Willis was becoming Will's best friend. They spoke 3 times a week on the phone, and they went to lunch together once a week. Polsky's portfolio was the largest monthly investment schedule Mr. Willis's branch of the Royal Bank administered. After the first quarterly recalibration, the numbers quadrupled. Mr. Willis wanted to know more about the primary trust, like who was managing it. Will gave no details. The primary trust was between he and Cobb. Mr. Willis had done some elementary number crunching. He called Will into his office one day and they went over some charts and spreadsheets. He pointed out that the goal, in principle, upon the inception of the enterprise, had been to preserve half of Mr. Polsky's wealth for his own expenses and investments, and to invest half in safe, short and long-term returns. The original numbers had been set at 50-50. The problem, as Mr. Willis had defined it through his close observations, was that the incoming revenues, the dispersals from the primary trust, had been growing unabated at an almost unbelievable rate. Therefore, to fulfill the original investment schedule, in principle, the automatic withdrawals had to be recalculated weekly. And even that is only going to bring us up to about 40-60, Mr. Willis added, accounting once again and again with genuine awe for the unabated growth on the returns from the primary trust. But wouldn't that be too much work for the bank? Will had asked. Oh no, not at all, Mr. Taube. That's what we're here for. Will agreed, and the whole enterprise was restructured. Mr. Willis took full responsibility for the accounting. He also ensured the money transfers to Costa Rica, and always in sums less than $10,000. He wisely suggested they establish a corporate interest in Costa Rica, and so, at the referral of Mr. Willis, Will contacted an elderly lawyer, abogado y notario, named Miguel Sanchez, who lived in a small mountain village called Atenas. He became their agent in Costa Rica. He was a lively old fellow who loved to talk on the telephone. He always began by describing what a beautiful day it was and how the sun had risen over the chapel in Atenas. He was a warm man. He had been a human rights lawyer in Nicaragua and had been forced to flee the country some decades past, in fear for his life. Will was astonished to learn how cheap land was in Costa Rica. Miguel Sanchez, abogado y notario, explained that locals could not invest in their own economy because interest rates were prohibitive. The government could not or would not stabilize the currency. It was criminal as far as Miguel Sanchez, abogado y notario, was concerned. He liked young William Taube, though. He liked the conservation investments in his country. If he did nothing, the whole country would go to land developers who could think of nothing but resorts. He was an aggressive foreign agent for 1109897 Ontario, Inc. He read the local papers every day for farm foreclosures and land auctions. Will had refused to make any purchases until he had analyzed the market for at least 1 quarter. Miguel Sanchez, abogado y notario, was on retainer. South American property statistics were faxed to Will every day. In the domestic market, Mr. Willis's main ambition since the late summer had been to free the 10% allocated to the currencies fund and invest it in local commodities like small apartment buildings with low maintenance costs and full tenancy. For every question Mr. Willis had an answer, it seemed as though his relationship with Polsky's portfolio was devotional. Even the name was whispered, Mr. Polsky, as the one with money is given automatic status, whether the money is earned or inherited. Will gave him the 10% to work with, and they set up a contract on the side that made Mr. Willis a commissioned consultant, but he lacked signing authority without Will's, and hence Mr. Polsky's, approval. They understood each other. The Warrior had become Will's spiritual goal. Cobb had told him that only someone with courage could find meaning in vision. He still took his long walking meditations when he could, but Cobb kept him quite busy. He wasn't giving Will's salary away. They had a lot of meetings. Sometimes Robert Polsky was there, sometimes he wasn't. Cobb was increasingly interested in the history, philosophy, and workings of the modern economy. Cobb and Will had spent hours cross-legged in the attic, going over the photocopies of Mr. Willis's graphs and spreadsheets. They spoke their own language. They called the secured capital dream money, and Cobb realized quickly that dream money could only be invested in a dream economy. Will always felt that he was very well taken care of by Cobb. There was no question about that. He had more pocket money than most lawyers. Yet questions about status crept into his mind. Nobody is completely comfortable until they know their place. Cobb told him that he was a coureur de bois, a runner of the woods. They were the first men to work with the Indians in Canada, and to do so they broke the King of France's boundaries. Cobb gave Will his blessing to manage the dream money as he dreamed fit, though he insisted that he be made aware of all transactions before they took place. Cobb was happy with the seed Will was sowing in the fields above the earth. The young William Tobe seemed to have been given some vision from the dream economy. There was purpose in his motion. He knew where he was going. His vision had given him a map of unknown places. If the dream fields reaped a good harvest, there would be a division of the common shares. Equity was a powerful incentive for Will, and it answered all his questions about status. Cobb had given him a vision quest. It would define his status. Cobb was a true Democrat. Mr. Willis probably had a lot of questions about the money, but he never asked them. That's what makes a good bank manager and a good consultant. He was only being responsible to the money, which was his only responsibility, and within that charge he showed a great acumen. Will had already given him a retainer to do 1109897 Ontario Inc.'s year-end reporting. The telephone rang down on Cobb's floor, the third floor. Will wasn't sure if Cobb was home. He thought that he had heard footsteps coming up the stairs, a door slam, but he couldn't be sure. There was no rush. He didn't have to run down the stairs from the attic. He had set the answering machine to 9 rings before it picked up. It drove Cobb crazy, but it was the only way he could get to every call. And as Cobb never answered the phone, he had to get to every call. The telephone was on a small end table at the foot of the stairs leading up to the attic. The stairs were very steep and they had to be taken slow. By the 4th ring, he was at the phone. "Hello," he said. It was for Cobb. "I don't know anything about peyote," Will said into the phone, "but I'll have Cobb call you back." He took the message and hung up. Just as he was about to stand and go back up the stairs, he heard a moan from the kitchen. The kitchen was on the other side of the wall. He thought he was hearing things, so he sat very still. He heard it again, a woman's low moan, and then a muffled giggle, as though it was from behind a hand. Will stood and walked around the corner and into the kitchen. Cobb was buck naked, his penis inside a blonde woman who was bent over the kitchen table, and there appeared to be another woman, a brunette, behind Cobb. She was licking his behind. "Who is that on the phone?" Cobb asked without interrupting his activity. "Some guy named Fillmore." Cobb nodded his head. "You have any idea what's making that banana smell?" Cobb asked, and the brunette girl pulled back from Cobb's behind and said, "Bananas," 2 or 3 times, and then she laughed hysterically. "I don't have a clue," Will said, and he turned and left. But he stopped at the foot of the stairs and said, "Do we want a building with 4 apartments and an unfurnished basement? Private sale?" "Full market value?" Cobb said from the kitchen. "I'd say about 70%, Will said. "Fuck yeah," Cobb answered. Will started up the stairs. "Oh," Cobb said, "there's a message from your girlfriend on the phone. She sounds like she's going to kill herself." "She's not my girlfriend," Will said from the attic, and with that statement, he shut the door behind him. End of chapter.